having a discussion and bringing light to some issues, people of color in the arts. We have quite a few guest panelists today, and I'm going to let Paul take it for the introduction of our guest panelists today. Paul?
Yeah, hi everybody. We're so excited that we have such a large group today. It's so exciting. It's really important for us that we, in a discussion about people of color and representation in the arts, that we are representing a full spectrum of people of color. So I'm going to take a step back and we'll just start directly to, well, at least on my screen, you're directly to my right, with Jason. If you can, we'll just go around and everybody give a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Jason VC. I'm an actor, and currently in Colorado Springs, Colorado right now, but I'm based in New York.
Now I'm muted. Jamal, why don't you take it next?
Hi, my name is Jamela Hunter, and I am an actor. I'm based out of Clarksville, Tennessee, but I also travel. So I am a traveling actress.
Yeah, good to see you again. It's been a while.
Good to see you too.
Jamal, how about you?
Hi, my name is Jamal Howard. I'm the co-artistic director of New American Folk Theater here in Chicago, and I also am a producer and a director in general and performer, and I'm originally from San Jose, California.
Awesome. And moving right along to your left, Zoe.
Hi, I'm Zoe Richards. I'm an actor based out of Brooklyn, New York.
Hi, Zoe. We're neighbors. I love it. Almost. J-Bo's going along.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan, or as Paul said, J-Bo's. I am a actor and rapper. I just put out my first album last year. And I am based in Chicago, which is where I'm coming to you live.
Nice. Welcome to the Table Talk.
Thank you.
Down, Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Mukuka. I'm an actor and theater teacher, and I'm based in Brooklyn as well.
Nice. All the New Yorkers. I love it. Javonde, can you go next?
Yes, hi, I'm Giovande Jones. I'm an actor, teacher, and director, also based in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, New York. And Juan Carlos.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos, and I am a conductor, and I'm a music educator here in Indiana.
Yeah, musicians. I love it. And as usual, I'm Paul Regano. I'm a New York-based musician and music director and all sorts of weird stuff. We are joined by our quarantine queens, Molly Hill and Miss Katie Barnes. Say hello.
Hello, friends.
Hello. Welcome back.
Yeah, let's dive in. So I think we're going to start with Molly. You're taking our first topic here.
Actually, Paul.
We're going to talk about the topics for a second. Paul.
Yeah.
Miss Katie's got an intro.
So we wanted to talk.
I missed.
Yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be breaking down the systemic racism within our own industry, within the performance industry, just a little bit. It's just the tip of the iceberg. These are just some of the voices that could tell you even more about their experiences. Always, always remember that. We reached out to friends, acquaintances, people we had worked with personally who could give us their firsthand experiences, and we asked them what they wanted to see addressed. So every topic you see today is something they said that they wanted to speak on today. And we just want to hand over our platform today to them so that they can have a chance to speak and teach us something. We're here to learn something today. So I encourage anyone who's listening today to just sit down, buckle in. It's going to be a wild ride, but listen and actually hear what they're saying. So Molly, you want to hit it up with this first topic?
I would love to. I am also just so excited to be here with you all and to be a listener to what you all have to say. So the first topic is the dangers of white comfort. So I don't know if there's a specific person who feels very passionately that wants to speak about this, either in general or in the theater industry, any specific stories. But I'm just going to open it up. Feel free to take it away. That's topic number 1.
It was me. Hello.
Yay! Hello.
Yes, again, J-Bo's here. Yeah, so I specifically told Katie that I wanted to talk about the dangers of white comfort, especially in theatrical spaces. And when I say that, a lot of people probably will be thinking, like, isn't everybody supposed to be comfortable? Are we all supposed to be comfortable? And while yes, that is very true, specifically white comfort is putting white comfort above everything else, and more specifically above people of color's comfort. It kind of goes hand in hand with white privilege. You know, like the privilege that white people have to navigate, you know, in their skin and not have to worry about being Black. White comfort is that reassurance that, you know, you do have these privileges and everyone is going to be stepping on eggshells, you know, to keep you comfortable and to keep you, you know, at a point where you are not, you know, feeling threatened, because that's a lot, you know. I myself have had to deal with, you know, the white comfort of artistic directors, casting directors, directors themselves, other actors. And it's always felt that their comfort was tantamount to mine. And that's kind of how the system has played it for years. You know, I don't know if any of you listen to the Scrubs Rewatch podcast, Fake Doctors, Real Friends. It's incredible, by the way. It's so good. But their producer Joel found a statistic for them that Latino and Latinx and Latina actors made up 3% of lead and co-lead roles in the last like 20 years or some shit like that. You know, like roles are made for white people, whole shows are made for white people. And I feel like it's a product of two things. One, all white spaces where people are worried about their white audiences and, you know, their white people coming in to audition and pretty much setting the tone first of being like, okay, this is a white space and we do white things. And I know, you know, I know a lot of people here in New York, and I heard a couple people in Chicago. It's definitely a problem in Chicago. It's definitely a problem in Chicago where an actor of color will walk into a mostly white space, and by virtue of by no virtue of, you know, like any specific casting director, any specific actor, anyone, the space itself has just been helmed a white space and a space for white comfort. And so walking into that kind of a space as a person of color is already threatening. You know, you're already having to deal with the fact that this space wasn't necessarily made for me, and at any given time I can do something, say something, not out of, you know, ill intent, not out of, you know, anger, just saying anything or doing anything at any time. I could ruin the sanctity of this white comfort and be thrown from this production, because it's happened multiple times. So I think what we really have to start looking at is, first of all, old people, because fuck old people. Sorry. No, but really, we have to start looking at who's making the decisions, why they're making those decisions, and are those decisions beneficial to everyone and not just majority white people. That's what I had.
That's great. Does any comments from the floor?
So it reminds me of speaking of Chicago, I went to the symphony, and they have the Chicago Latino Symphonic Alliance, which I'm a member of, and they do concerts for that the Latino Alliance puts on. And so I go to those concerts, and it one time particularly, I felt like it was like we were sort of outsiders renting this space for our own little concert. And it was just, it felt, I felt like, should I be here? Should I not be here? How should I dress? Because we're still at the symphony, but also I want to show my culture and my support for this wonderful Latino alliance. And it's just, I really did feel out of place. But I was going through one of my episodes of should I continue my career path? Should I not? But seeing the conductor, who is a very famous conductor, he conducts the Nashville Symphony. He's from Costa Rica, Giancarlo Guerrero. Seeing a brown person come out, stand on that podium, conducting one of the finest symphonies in the world. And I mean, it changed my life. From that moment on, I said, you know what? There needs to be more people. He looks like me, first of all. And if he can do it, I can do it. And there's other people who can do it. And I mean, I just saw myself on that podium, and the music, it was all Latin American music, spoke to me. And so in a space where the majority of conductors are white males, you don't see much Latinx representation in those fields. Well, specifically in the classical music field, it was an eye-opening experience for me. And it was, like I said, it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. But from that moment on, you're here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So I'm ready to do just that in my field. So
it's my new favorite quote.
Hi. So okay, the question posed is what again about white comfort?
The dangers of white comfort.
The dangers of white comfort. Okay, I think part of the issue is that we know the dangers. Everyone knows the dangers. People may pretend they don't know the dangers. The thing that should be questioned is, how do we stifle that? How do we stifle white comfort in spaces? And sometimes just shutting up and listening and understanding that there are multiple perspectives in the room and giving space for everyone in the room. Unfortunately, it's a thing that people have to actively change. When we're going into these spaces together, we have to ask ourselves, how do I hold space for everyone in this room? How do I help encourage everyone's voices? And unfortunately, until we change the number of people or the percentage of people in the room, that's going to be an issue that plagues us. A lot of us, especially here, are walking into rooms that are a majority of white people, especially on projects. For me, when I'm doing shows that are about Black people, about Black voices, we have majority producing team that's white. We have white directors, and I think that we have to dismantle that and even the playing field, and that's how we're going to address the issue.
And I would also offer a shifting of the question to kind of like, what are the benefits of that white comfort can offer people, actors, artists of color? Coming most recently from a primarily white institution for my MFA, I found that what helped me the most was having the white artists in the room look to me and be like, hey, can I speak up for you in this moment? Can I say something on your behalf? Because I do have the comfort of not being threatened to raise an issue. I do have the comfort of like not, being under fire for speaking up. And so can I use my privilege? Can I use my comfort to benefit you in any way? How can I help either call out the things that I'm witnessing by simply just like repeating it out loud, right? Telling whether it's a teacher, whether it's a director, just be like, did you just say, is this what I've heard? Is this right? Or to like be the person at the head of the charge to call out everything, you know? Use your comfort, use your privilege. We can't act like it's gonna disappear overnight. Racism wasn't built overnight, it's a system. And if you wanna be part of the solution, you have to activate it as white people. Because if we could, as people of color, have dismantled it, it would have been gone a long time ago.
I think that's such a big, important part of this discussion is that racism wasn't built overnight, or at least the system that it operates in wasn't built overnight, and it's going to take a long time to dismantle that within our institutions and our theater institutions. And so it is an active job or work that everyone needs to do, especially our white counterparts. It's especially important that they are actively in the room, whether it's the rehearsal room, the house of a theater on performance night, or an audition room, you know, all the different production room, all those different spaces. White people in those spaces need to step up and need to actively ask those questions of themselves or the group or the organization that they're representing each time they're engaging, really. I worked for Emerald City Theater, which is a theater for young audiences company. I was the associate artistic director there for a chunk of time. And I had the pleasure of programming works that were about inviting Black and brown kids into the space and into the room. A lot of that was working with kids who were, it was their first time coming to the theater. So we were trying to make sure that they felt invited, welcome, and they knew that this was a place for them to call home and for them to return to. And so one way to try and dismantle that danger of white comfort is to get Black and brown kids into theater, whether it's participating in it directly or coming in as an audience member. A lot of kids don't get the chance to see theater, and most of those kids are Black and brown or poorer, and there's a lot that can be gained by just having kids see themselves represented on stage and in a space where they feel like they are welcome.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the theater was designed as a space for only a certain group of people to feel comfortable in the first place. And I think that there needs to be a level of reorganization in every single aspect of theater. And to do that, one has to really look back and see the way that Black and brown people and people of color were allowed to perform for white audiences, and the kinds of roles we were allowed to play, the kind of physicality and the kind of costumes that we wore. And we're allowed to wear. And I think some of that it continues today, because there has never been a reorganization truly of the structure of theater. And I think in addition to diversifying audiences, we need to diverse casting directors. We need to diverse the administration behind the people who do the sets, the people who design the costumes. And maybe it needs to go as far as even the structure of the buildings. It needs to be a understanding of who gets to feel comfortable in the theater. And I think that kind of work needs to be done by the people who run theaters today. They need to sit amongst themselves and ask themselves the questions. I don't think Black people, people of color, have that problem. And so the people who have been perpetuating those issues, they need to sit and begin to do the work.
So in 1985, there was a production of Porgy and Bess that the conductor wanted it to be uncut, every single scene, every single piece of music. And it was about 4 hours. And I mean, that's for an opera, that's okay. But then recently, the new Porgy and Bess is, I think, 2.5 to 3 hours. So it has been cut down. It has been reworked to sort of fit or feel more comfortable to the audiences. And I say that because nobody cuts back on like Wagner operas, which are extremely long and very elaborate. Nobody does any of those things because it's sacred. But you have Porgy and Bess, which is a wonderful story, and you have all these reworkings. And there were headlines where the Met hires an all-Black chorus for the opera, and it's like, okay, why is this? I'm glad it made headlines, but it's like, why is this? Why is it shouldn't be surprising? You know what I mean? But I think it's important, and I think it was important that an all-Black cast was at the opera. Another thing was just the fact that the representation in the opera, first of all, and it was the last time this was done, it was 30 years ago. So it has been 30 years since this opera had been performed at the Met, but yet things like La Boheme and Madame Butterfly, I mean, they come year after year after year after year. But just this piece of American culture, we wait 30 years for it. And it happens with this whole, the 250th birthday of Beethoven. People were, coronavirus ruined Beethoven, and it's Beethoven's year. I'm like, every year is a Beethoven year for the orchestras. They play Beethoven every single season. So we need to redefine how we're thinking about musicians and the theater. I love the theater. I love the stage. And so we need to have that representation, not just every 30 years or, every major celebration, but it has to become sort of normal. And I don't think we're there yet.
That's actually a really good segue into the next topic of conversation for today, which is the lack of representation for people of color behind the scenes and then also on stage. Does anybody have any personal experiences with a lack of representation? I'm sure we've all had those experiences. If anybody wants to step up.
I guess I can go first. Yeah, I think all of us. I think all of us in this panel at one point probably can tell you at least one story where they weren't feeling represented. For me, it really came to a head with the last show. I haven't done a show in over 2 years now. Almost 2 years now. And my last show that I did was at the Metropolis Theater in Arlington Heights. So you already know, if you don't live in Chicago, Arlington Heights is a white suburb, just super white suburb. And every single board member is white. We had a white director, we had a white prop person, we had a white music director, we had white everyone at the table was white. And we were doing this piece of theater, Avenue Q, which is insanely provocative. It speaks on racial issues, not in an incredible way, but it still does. And we had a hard time. Speaking about these things. We would have conversations about systemic racism, and when we'd have conversations about racism in the theater, and it was almost like, again, going back to white comfort, these conversations to our entire team of white representatives were uncomfortable for them. And I think that really hurt the production. Also, another thing that hurt the production, oh my God, I really hated this. The song from Avenue Q that everyone knows is Everyone's a Little Bit Racist. Super dated song, doesn't work anymore. If you're just wondering, go back and listen to it. It's horrible. But doing that song for basically entirely white audiences at the time was super uncomfortable. It kind of was, because like our Kate Monster was a person of color. So like basically everyone on the stage except for our Princeton was a person of color. So it was basically just like this stage full of people of color giving our white audiences being like, it's okay, everyone's racist. You can be racist, it's cool. And it's just like, no. But like those conversations that we weren't able to have because of our all white staff really hurt the production. And I think that's happening all throughout the country, is just you have these theaters who see diversity as something that they want to strive for and see that they want more people of color in their shows, and they want that clout of being like I love Porchlight. I've worked with them twice. Porchlight's a company in Chicago, but Porchlight does these shows of color all of the time, and they just recently, I think like 1 year ago, got their first Black person on their board. So it's very tantamount that we start applying pressure on, first of all, people in leadership positions that aren't listening and have refused to listen, whether it be their age, their experience, their whatever. We need to start applying pressure for them to step down and make way for a new generation where it is queer friendly, people of color friendly, witch friendly, just all of these things. And I think that obviously starts at the top.
I would like to say something. Here in my hometown in Clarksville, we have that same issue where everyone on the panel is pretty much white, and there's not a lot of shows being represented for people of color. I just recently went to an event, and we hosted an event called Be the Light, and the artistic director was like, we're going to start changing our season. And thinking about it, being here for so long, I have to work outside of my state, which has a regional theater, and they don't put up more shows that inquire or add more people of color. We just recently hired someone on the board, someone in their staff, and he's like scenic directing, and it took this long for him to hire somebody of color that I can feel comfortable and say, hey, oh my goodness, we can talk about this. This is a safe zone for us to talk about. Hey, let's pitch some ideas. Do you know if we could do this? Do you think this show could be put in? Can the panel board have a discussion about these things? And it's sad. It saddens me that we don't have that representation out, so that the Black community can come in and see these shows that we want to produce, because nobody is talking about these shows. It shouldn't have to take a movement for Black Lives Matter for you to start looking at your season and say, hey, we want to incorporate more people of color today. It's 2020, and my brother and we discuss these things too. And he's like, how come you're not working at your local theater. And I'm like, well, he doesn't think outside of the box and put on plays that's for me specifically. I have to go elsewhere to get a job. And I should be worried about it, but what can I do? And it's a matter of me as well speaking and going to these board meetings and actually letting them know, hey, we have the community who want to come see these certain shows, but you're not putting them on.
I'm going to continue Jamila's thought there and say again a restructuring of the question so I'll avoid the experiences because we know that experience exists. I'm from Missouri. I went to undergrad in Missouri. I did some theater in Missouri. I was the only person there at times, absolutely. But what we need to do is examine our place, our responsibility, and then the action that follows. So I did a little search. I looked at the theater, the Goshen Theater. And now the board of directors and what do they call it? The task force? Is the task force the administration at the Goshen Theater?
The task force, yeah, the building was in disrepair. A little history on Goshen Theater. The building was in disrepair and abandoned, basically, and needed a huge maintenance. So the task force are a group of people who raised money to get the building refurbished. So it was folks from the community who were who ran in a lot of circles of fundraising, basically. So they were, mucky mucks. So that's who the task force is. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Now, I was on the website looking for the staff of the theater itself, the artistic director and things like in that line. I'm not seeing that, but I am seeing them. Right. Yeah. Okay. So artistic director, this is the job now. How do you solve that question? Yeah. How do you enact action and not one other white person can be hired on your team? Right. The board completely white. Yeah. The board is overwhelmingly white.
And of a certain age. Yeah.
And of a certain age. And so now we must hire a staff that includes all of the people here that are giving time to the effort.
Oh, I'm taking applications.
Action. Absolutely. Absolutely. Send them out because I know plenty of people here that would kill it. That nice, beautiful theater, all those nice white people getting that money, hire us. We'll make some good programming.
Yeah,
that's how no problem.
Yeah, the great thing with the situation I'm in is that I can actually take a lot of these like action points because I'm literally starting this theater from the ground up. She was abandoned for a long time. We're renovating. We literally put new seats in today. So we've done a lot of like remediation and restored her. And this first program that we're doing is this program for kids, the very first action. The very first performers on that stage are going to be children. And it's a pretty diverse population of kids. We've got a good team together for the camp, but we've got to keep continuing. And I think the first step for us is education, and we're excited about that. But yeah, no, I love this. And as we hire staff, since I'm the only full-time staff member at this point, we have an eye toward diversity. We have an eye toward branching out even outside of this area because other voices need to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly, with all the love in the world, you can't hire any white people. I'm sorry. If you want to uphold today, if you want to make that change today, because I spent a lot of time in a reading in a chat of yesterday about the difference between performative ally and actionable ally. And we want to make sure that this is, I can't speak for everyone, but Maria and Zoe are my sisters, so I am going to speak for them. But we want to make sure that what we're saying here today turns into action. And so, yeah, I'll hand it over.
On that, I'll say an actionable step that I think regional theaters in general should start addressing is that there's a comfort in like putting on the August Wilson in February, right? You get like your annual Black people play. Congratulations, people of color. We acknowledge you on these stages. And yet a lot of times these plays and performances are being directed, designed, completely, everything backstage is white. Right? So that is an actionable place where these theaters can take steps. If you're putting on a Black production, there needs to be Black people behind stage. Behind the table, there need to be people of color, period. Because there's no way that the people on stage are ever going to be comfortable to speak up, to truly be themselves and express their highest artistry. If the people who are in power, the people who are getting the much bigger paychecks in some cases, are people who don't look anything like them and don't have any experiences. The worst experiences I think a lot of us have had has been justifying our Blackness and our Black experience to white directors, to white institutions who asked us to participate. You know, it's like, we don't need to prove it. Trust us. Trust that dismantling this thing and being a true ally is not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy to be discriminated against. It hasn't been easy to be left out of these conversations. It hasn't been easy to commit our lives to this art form that is not inclusive. So it's not easy on our side. So it can't be easy on the other side, right? And so I think everyone in power needs to take a check inside their spirits and be ready for the work that it calls for, the true work. And I think a simple, like right now thing that we can do is, you want Black bodies on the stage to prove that you're so diverse, you also need to have Black bodies behind the table, having the voice, having the power, having some say.
I have something to say. Hello, everybody. So I have worked with Jamila before. So we're both in Tennessee, and Jamila's in Clarksville, I'm in Nashville. So one thing that she brought up that's really important is that Nashville has 3 to 4 professional organizations where as an actor you can get paid. I'm not an actor, I'm actually a stage manager. I'm the only Black stage manager, and most of them, I would say probably 60% of the stage managers are female. So with that being said, there was recent in the last 7 to 8 days with everything going on with George Floyd, there was a gay Black man and a white heterosexual man had a conversation. Both of them are actors that I know, young, they're probably in their late 20s, had a conversation about what was going on. And the white actor decided to call out these professional theaters on the Theater Nashville Facebook page, okay? Now, as you can tell, that caused some stir because all of these theater companies were tagged and then had to either say something, ignore it, or make a statement. Most of them made statements about their support of people of color. However, one particular one that I work with, I've actually worked with all of them, but one particular one, the guy called me, the president of the board, and was like, hey, I don't know this guy. Do you know this guy? Has he ever worked for us? I don't appreciate being called out. Now, this is an African-American president, which is one of the few, because there is none. Most of these boards are completely white, of over 50, okay, is the demographic. And so I had to kindly tell him, actually, the white actor that called you out has worked in a show that you produced before your time, so you didn't know him. But one thing your organization has done is that y'all were known for being diverse. In the last 3 years, the board, besides him, is completely white. So the one or two plays, the one they do in February, the honorable, like she said, Black play, everybody does in February, they were doing, and then they would do another one. In the last 3 years, they have not done any Black plays. And then last year on their, actually this year for the season, they wanted to do Raising the Sun. And of course, COVID-19 happened, so that didn't come to fruition. And then I found out that Dreamgirls was supposed to be on the next season. Both of these plays they've done before because I was a stage manager for both of them. And we're talking about doing these plays in the last 5 years. Why are we recycling? I love Raising in the Sun and Dreamgirls, but you have so many Black playwrights that are very popular. Lynn Nottage, Dominique Morisseau, that are doing plays right now that you could produce that nobody in Nashville has done, and they won't do them. So it's like, okay, we're going to get people behind the scenes. I commend that. But also, stop recycling all this old stuff, you know what I mean? And do something new and provocative, because there's so many Black playwrights that need to be produced and that people need to see. The Tennessee Rap were actually going to put on African Mean Girls, and I was completely shocked. Now, along with that was Ragtime, and I can't think for the life of me the third one. But for this season, I guess they decided with the new change of board that they were going to do some more current work. So I think we need to make sure that we're doing that as well, is that we're not recycling stuff that these people have seen before and do things that playwrights that are more thought-provoking, so that we can see. And then again, have Black directors do them, have Black, not just Black stage managers, and not just Black people in the band, you know, for these musicals. Have lighting designers, have internships. There are so many kids in these colleges. We have Tennessee State University, Fisk University here, and their theater departments are some of the best. Hire these kids. We hire them for acting jobs, hire them behind the scenes too, so that we can have more Black stage managers, Black lighting designers, Black sound technicians, Black directors, Black assistant directors, so that, you know, it's way more diverse and paints a clearer picture of what our world actually looks like.
Alexis, could you introduce yourself one more time, just because you were a little late, so we didn't get your intro?
Thank you. I was having technical difficulties. So my name is Alexis Levine, and I have been stage managing for the last 12 years here in Nashville, Tennessee. And yes, that's me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alexis, I agree with you about the recycling of these plays. Once again, it goes back to my comment of, you know, afflicting the comfortable. I think we've gotten, I guess our Caucasian population has, you know, it's okay to put on Dreamgirls. I'll support that. It's okay. I'll support Ragtime. I'll support West Side Story. These are all things. I love West Side Story, by the way. And just, we've gotten comfortable with those things, but we need to start, you know, pushing the limits a little bit more. Well, a lot more. But, you know, we got to get people uncomfortable again. And that's how these plays, you know, like the West Side Story and the Dreamgirls and Ragtime and Raisin in the Sun, when those first came out, I'm sure there was, you know, these pushback from the community, but we've gotten, once again, comfortable with these issues. And so we will support Dreamgirls again, and we will support Ragtime, and we will support these things. But it's time for, you know, another push, and, you know, we got to get more comfortable with new productions.
I think that was a really great. Unless anyone else wanted to talk about this.
Oh, I just wanted to say real quick that if in your community someone is putting on Hairspray in the year of our Lord 2020, shut that shit down. Shut it down. No one needs to be doing Hairspray. Stop it. That's all I had.
I have one more thing that I would like to say. I just think that it's really important that if you do hire people of color, we need more exposure. If you want more people of color to come into your theaters, you need to put us on the programs. You need to put us on your websites. It needs to be more exposure so that our Black people can feel comfortable and say, hey, you worked at that theater. I know you. I've seen you. Can you tell me a little bit more? I looked on their websites. These are all branding ideas that people of color need to see so they can feel comfortable and say, hey, let me send out my resume. I see that they have a nice board and they have people of color that I can see, that I can feel comfortable with. So I think that's really important too. And that's all I have to say.
I just wanted to add a little bit too, that it is so important that we focus on leadership throughout this, that that leaders are who set the bar, and if they are not people of color or are not really positive and supportive allies, in this fight against racism, then it's never gonna amount to much more than doing a Dreamgirls again, or, you know, Ragtime with a white director again. So it's just, leadership is key, is what I want to say. Board members, artistic directors, executive directors, managing directors, all of them. There's an effect that'll happen if you change at the top. Now, that doesn't mean don't do work everywhere, especially on production teams, but you're gonna get a big effect if you change what's going on at the top of these companies. And that applies beyond theater. I know we'll have like parents listening, and they can take this into any part of their life. It's really at any organization in any level. It's not going to change until the leadership changes.
I didn't want to cut anybody off if we still want to talk about that. I just saw a really good segue for our next topic, and that's why I jumped in. But if anyone else wanted to talk about representation, about anything in there. So we talked about causing discomfort, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think one of the foremost things about our next topic is causing discomfort, and that is using art as a protest. A lot of people see art maybe as a way to be comfortable and escape, but can we talk about how art can be a voice of protest, especially right now? Anybody have thoughts?
I guess I'll start again. Well, I think if you look back on the history of art, you will find that art has always been used as a form of protest. Art has always been sort of this provocative means of speech that that you don't necessarily have to like worry about, oh, well, I'm going to get in trouble for this. No, you're just making your art, and you're just making what I find theaters have a hard time with, and someone touched on it earlier, is a lot of this art that is being used to push an agenda is very performative. And when we say that, what we mean is you're just doing it for show. You're just doing it to put on a face of diversity. You're just doing it to, you know, tell people or give people the illusion that, hey, I'm with the cause, I'm fighting. And it's just like, you have in mostly white spaces, white people have the ability to shut that off and not be performative and not be provocative and not stand, whereas Black people don't have that privilege. People of color don't have that privilege. You know, our lives kind of come down to, at the end of the day, a fight. You know, we fight against white supremacy every day. We fight against institutional racism every day. You know, we have to use our art as a form of protest and as a form of speaking up, whereas white people don't have to do that and can adorn that if they want to and if they feel so inclined. But I think what needs to be focused on is while using your art for protest, you have to I'm trying to think. While using your art for protest, you really have to be an advocate always. It can't just be, oh, well, we're doing this one thing and then we're going to go back to our milquetoast, you know, Mary Poppins. Like, no, like it has to be an always kind of mentality.
I,
Anyone else?
I would say that like theater is inherently political, and it is inherently asking you as an audience member to respond to the story or the themes or the characters that are being shown to you, and we obviously have a very active choice we can make in what we choose to put our energy behind when it comes to art, and what sort of messages those are making and saying. So it's just really about don't slow down. It's like push that throttle forward as much as possible at this point. Yeah.
If there's no one else, we'll move on. Anybody? Okay. The next topic we have is dismantling this idea of colorblind casting. Anyone? Jamal? Anyone?
I've been waiting.
Okay, great. Jason, hit it.
That's why I'm here. Hey, y'all. So I actually made some notes to break it down because I think when we talk about colorblind casting, there's a few things that we're getting wrong from jump. We need to stop saying colorblind casting because there is no such thing as not saying color. It's a very white thing to say. colorblind casting, whether it's conscious or not conscious, is based out of white gaze, white comfort, and white ego. Let's break that down. The reality is that into two parts. First part is the reality is that audiences in general, of all colors, whatever, are only trained to believe white actors, particularly men. A white man can say, I'm a frog, and the audience goes with it. A white man can say, I'm Italian, and the audience goes with it. A white man can say, I'm Meryl Streep, and the audience goes with it. A black man or a black woman can say the exact same things, and no matter what they do, the audience will still see the color. And that infuses everything. Now, there are great things that can happen with non-traditional casting, i.e. Aisha Jackson in Frozen, what that means for little black girls to see themselves as a princess. But when you do colorblind casting, two things you have to be aware of: the process for that person of color in that traditionally white role, how they have to justify what they have to go through, what that means, and the recognition that no matter what that actor does to just tell the story, the audience is still just going to see that black person. And what those people in that audience see. Perfect example. The last revival of Carousel, which I don't even know why we keep doing that. The last revival of Carousel, those producers and creatives were patting themselves on the back for having the first black Billy Bigelow, and all I saw was O.J. Simpson beaten trying to kill his wife. But they were so proud of themselves for having a black Billy Bigelow, and people of color were kind of like, the optics of this are crazy. Not only is Billy Bigelow black, but then the other villain, Jigger, is I think he was Pakistani. So the two villains are people of color. I've done Oklahoma, unfortunately, 3 times. When you get called in for Judd, which is usually the black track, I always say, do you have an intention of having Lori or Curly be played by people of color? Because one, I'm not going to be the help and the villain. And on top of that too, I'm not going to be the cause of some white woman losing her mind and being scared on stage. I'm also not going to have a white man come into a scene and try to pretend and convince me to kill myself. But on the other end, the creatives, they are patting themselves on the back because look, there is someone black on stage. Dear Evan Hansen, before it came to Broadway, they got criticized for having an all-white cast. Then they decided to cast the role of Alana as a black girl. Now the thing about that is that what that black girl, or actress, has to do is justify in her mind why she's the only one on stage. And that informs what kind of Black woman she is. The rest of the audience, the majority of white audiences might not see that. And the creators are kind of like, look, we've got diversity. Whereas the Black audiences might be like, wow, she really nailed what it's like to be the only Black girl in an all-white school. Because that's what Crystal Illinois did. That's what. So when you make certain choices, instead of being colorblind, you have to be color conscious. If you do a production of Othello, and you have a traditionally cast Othello, and then you cast someone like me as Cassio, what are the implications of that? It goes beyond just being like, look, we have two Black men on stage. You have a dark-skinned Black man on stage and a light-skinned Black man on stage usurping the rank. And all these things can just add different layers. But I think what happens is that with colorblind casting, it stops at saying, look at what we did. And they fail to see that even if they did something, you're putting a block up against that actor of color, because the audiences are not trained to just let that actor be whatever they are. Perfect case in point. I don't know if any of y'all know the musical Passing Strange. The second act of Passing Strange, it's a cast of Black actors acting their faces off, and you have to remind people that they're not playing Black characters. The second act, they are all white characters. The accent work could be impeccable. The acting beats could be on point. The direction could be there. And you still have to remind people that they're playing white Germans, white Dutch people. If it was a cast of all white people, we would have been there with them on the journey from jump. So being an actor of color is political, because no matter what you do, it automatically infuses what the audience is seeing. So therefore, there is no such thing as colorblind casting. Color conscious, color infused, and then on top of that, colorblind casting has created this coveting of roles. I had to, as a Black actor, I had to come to terms with my own decolonization of why I coveted certain roles and why I wanted to be non-traditionally cast in this role. Because being non-traditionally cast in a white role means that I'm legit. And when I do those roles, blocking myself from infusing that role with my Blackness, with my queerness, with my ancestry. Because it's not, because when you cast Jason Vesey as, I don't know, Barone in Love Slavers Lost, you're actually not asking him to bring his Blackness. You're asking him to just do the role traditionally, so that we can all say, look, we did this. But there's no way for me to not bring in something. And as an actor of color, when I go into roles that are traditionally white, I feel the instinct to still block myself in something, right? And then my last point, the other issue about colorblind casting is that colorblind casting promotes white people thinking they can do other shows that they can't. There is no reverse, because most pieces that have to do with people of color are directly related to the experience. The fact that there are more white people who have done Once on This Island than Black people is because of colorblind casting. Because what colorblind casting does is it allows white audiences and white actors to say, I want to do this, therefore I'm going to. And that's how we get all white productions of Hairspray. I'm done. Okay, go.
Thank you, Jason. Anybody else?
I don't really have anything. I just wanted to say, Jason, that was amazing. You did so good. Thank you for that.
So if anyone wanted to add to that, I sort of also thought of a segue into the next question, but feel free to keep going with the colorblind casting idea. So going off of that, moving into like higher education and theater education, what is the best way within that higher education, and what do we need to do for that to be what students are being taught in college programs and youth programs and et cetera?
So I think this part of the conversation is super important, because theatrical education, particularly in higher education, are the seeds and what lead to people's track business-wise, depending on if they choose to, go into that career. But I always think about one instance when I was at my alma mater, where I was in a class, and I was a theater kid, so I came in ready to go. There wasn't a lot that I couldn't be told in terms of material and things like that. I knew that stuff. But I remember being in a class and not knowing a specific Chekhov play. I believe it was The Cherry Orchard. And it became a situation where I just was honest. I was like, I've actually never read it. And the gasps and the notes that I received for not knowing The Cherry Orchard as an actor from my professor and my classmates, the conversation became about me not knowing The Cherry Orchard. And I remember, being a young upstart and just saying, well, so tell me about the piano lesson. Tell me about Flying West by Pearl Cleage, or Blues for Mr. Charlie. Again, I had to know The Cherry Orchard, but y'all don't have to know Two Trains Running. That seems a little off to me. We have a whole semester where we just read O'Neill and Shaw. That's a decade worth of scripts right there, because they all 4 hours long. But my white counterparts don't have to know. They only have to know A Raisin in the Sun. Okay, so right then and there, the equity and equality of just material that actors and theater artists have to know and should be expected to know, particularly in the American lexicon, is vastly off. If you're a POC, you have to know every white thing, because every white thing is a classic. Even referring to August Wilson as the foremost African-American playwright is wrong. He's one of the most foremost American playwrights, period.
Jason, absolutely. That you don't have the American canon without the Black experience, without the Black playwright. So absolutely, Lorraine Hansberry, Amiri Baraka, then Leroy Jones, August Wilson. Those are American playwrights. So I am a theater educator. And I'm actually in the middle of developing a class for the university I'm teaching for now with the head of the program. We're developing a class on a more performance-based class, but something that's radical, something that he in his 30 years teaching never heard of, but a class that is solely based off of the work of Black playwrights. And because here in New York City, our student population is much more diverse than in Missouri. But the radical thing is, well, not radical, I'll say absurd thing is, I'm a Black acting teacher, theater teacher, and with a BFA in acting and an MFA in acting, and I've never had a teacher of color in the theater training, not once, never. It was so bad that a professor in undergrad, Katie, Sarah Wiggin, in my senior year, she came to me and said, "Hi, Gio, I don't know you very well, but there are 2 Black students in my class and they want to work on a Black scene. All I know is The Raisin in the Sun, and they didn't want to do that. Do you have any suggestions?" Well, me coming fresh off of my education in that program or in my senior year, I had no solution because I was taught by 100% white people. And so the first step is getting more people of color on the faculty. The second step is educating yourself on all of the American canon, not just the alabaster part, but get the dark part up in there too. Absolutely. And then we have to ask ask ourselves how we're approaching scene work. In my first year of grad school, one of my fellow Black classmates, we had to go up to the theater teacher or the acting teacher and say, hey, we're doing all of these scenes. We're doing Inge, we're doing Angels in America and all of these things, but how do we approach our character analysis? When it says race, what do we write? Because Picnic is not about Black people. That would exist completely different. And if you look at the style of writing, Picnic could be comparable to August Wilson. So why aren't we just doing the August Wilson stuff? You know, and so we have to restructure our way of thinking. You know, the teacher, she was white and she has every right to say this, but she said, oh, I want to do Inge because it's the perfect play. But that's the perfect play for her as a teacher. Again, her white comfort. But she has to do right by the students. I could tell you the horrors of approaching the scene work, playing that role. I didn't know. I didn't feel that connection as deep. So we have to change the way we look at the canon first, and then the way we approach the work, and hopefully get more faculty of color.
Also, just like a bigger imagination with the leaders in education, faculty, and stuff. A lot of my experience from my alma mater, for me specifically, was felt somewhat limiting in terms of me as a performer, because there was a lack of imagination for somebody that looked like me or sounded like me. I'm a queer person. I'm somewhat flamboyant, and there was a lack of understanding of the type of character I could play, simply because my appearance and how I sounded, and that lack of imagination goes to play choice, it goes to scene study choices, it goes throughout the whole thing. So there's just a lot you can do that's outside the realms of what's conventional or what fits into white comfort. If you just think about it for like a second longer, that was something that I felt was lacking in my experience with higher education, especially when it's something that doesn't have an audience. So it's like, why are we putting all these crazy restrictions on ourselves and not learning what we really can do, what the full breadth of our abilities are in theater? Yeah.
Oh, and also one other thing, when you're looking at the scene work that you can do for scene study, go to people of color write white folk in their plays as well, and they're great sources of scene study, and so don't limit yourselves.
That's extremely helpful. As somebody who is putting together an educational program for young people now with the hope of expanding it into some older students. Our top age right now is 14, and we're hoping to incorporate more ages and better programming as we move forward, and expand the number of weeks and our reach into every community, and especially communities of people of color. Our school system is minority majority now, and in Goshen. We have a very large Latinx population, and we're taking initiative to take those steps. So this is all extremely enlightening and helpful for me. And as someone who is an educator. Jason, yeah.
Could I just say, on that point, I have to say that I think part of the reason when I came into my theater program in college, which was a PWI, my confidence in my knowledge and how I wanted to be in theater was informed because, in combination with my parents and me growing up at a regional theater, my my parents approached everything black first. If I got a G.I. Joe, you get in the black one first, right? So before I read a lot of white plays, my parents already gave me all the black plays. So when I knew what the contributions were of people who looked like me to theater, I came in already knowing that I had a place there because there were receipts. So if you have a bunch of Latinx, this is the time to start showing them now. So when they get to a place where there's not a lot of them, they can be like, excuse me, why are we not reading this? Why are we not reading this? You want to do a show? What about this? And then so essentially, can't nobody tell them nothing. You know?
I love it.
And I also think, like for teachers and educators, like if you have one student of color in your class, then you also have a responsibility to expose that student to other artists of color, period. Whether it's like, hey, here's a mentor that I think, like, here's a bridge to a mentor. Hey, here's a guest artist that's gonna come into the room and just have a conversation. Like, if you have a large group of people of color, it's as students, then there's a responsibility to make sure facilitators and those educators are of color and are reflective of them. I know we all feel like it's a capitalist society and I gotta protect myself and protect my own, and this is who I know. Like, yeah, that's who you know, and that might even be who applies, right? But the empathy comes from the extra effort it takes to be like, hey, I think I know this one person of color director. I don't know if they have educational experience, but let me just ask if they would be willing. Let me just ask if they would be willing. And that can shift the whole dynamics of a person's arts educational trajectory. You know, what they think is possible, what is necessary. When we're educating these students right now in 2020, we're not educating them to create theater necessarily right now. We're informing the theater that will be produced in 2040, right? And I think theatrical institutions and arts education institutions, we are all about challenging people's understanding of maybe gender and sexuality in a more comfortable way than we are in challenging their understanding of like race and culture. Right? Like even as a Black artist and a Black person in this country, I don't only go see Black shows necessarily. I love going to see an Ayat Akhtar, you know, a Jose Rivera can be popping, because it's not about just seeing yourself reflected physically, right? There's more to be offered from understanding the person walking down the street who maybe doesn't look like you, that doesn't come from that same culture. There's so much wealth and knowledge in that. And if educators, from my experience, have been very comfortable in the classics, in what has already been done, what's a standard now, but really they need to be educating themselves more than anyone, right? If you're gonna say you're an artist, a teaching artist, like, are you up to date with like who's like out there, who's being produced, who's trying to emerge, like what are the different forms, right? There are all these new things happening. This is a freaking arts. This is not a financial institution. Why are we trying to run it as if we're teaching these kids how to bank? They're not, they're artists. Let's be creative and let's always keep that rather than keeping the comfort.
That's a really interesting point, because I think a lot of times, to that point, you know, a lot of people are just worried about teaching them Shakespeare and teaching them Molière and teaching them, you know, Shaw, and it benefits no one to teach new people to the medium of old tricks. You know, it benefits, like, yes, we should be teaching kids the history of theater, but we should also be doing that in the scope of, hey, our history's fucked up. Like we gotta, you know, like we have to teach people that, yes, history is there for us to look back on and to, you know, and to reference, but we need to, as educators, we need to sort of bring these kids out of the past. You know, like, there's so many works being done right now, and it's very important for educators to teach themselves about this, and B, to really start to teach kids about not only the new theater that's going on around them, but also the injustices of the past and how we can shape that to a better tomorrow.
I wanted to say something really quick. The one key thing that the last three speakers just said is the educators, don't be lazy. There's a laziness that comes to going back to the past, and also be accountable. If you're saying that you have a white organization and you have a few minorities in your class that you're trying to teach, and you have maybe one person of color on staff, why are you going to that person of color on staff to ask them to educate the minorities? No, you can ask for assistance, but you need to be doing the work. You need to be doing the research if you call yourself an educator. Like any other field, because I have an accounting background. So I have to stay up on it. I have to stay up on new tax laws and things like that. Why is it different for the arts? You should be staying up on new playwrights every, 2 to 5 years? It's coming along. It's ever evolving and ever changing. That hit me deep that the lady said about, here it is, we're more comfortable about gender fluidity than race. Are we kidding ourselves? Really? Like, get with it. Race should not be a scary issue or a scary topic. So yes, teach about the history and stuff, but educate yourself and stop being lazy, and infuse these and hire people that represent people of color on your staff. We talked about this with leadership and things like that, but have programs, because I'm gonna tell you right now, I've mentored with the white kids. The white kids eat it up. They want to learn about things. Like she said, I love Black plays, but I want to see things. We want to be challenged. That's what art does. Art challenges you. Art, when you leave from a good play or a good musical and you're like, dang, that really, I didn't think about that way. Or that gave me a new perspective. That's what art is supposed to do. And the younger white kids get it. These adults need to come with it. And, challenge yourself and stop being so comfortable and being lazy, because that's really what it is.
Alexa, I'm going to jump in on that. I love this idea of challenge yourself, because the first thing that I challenged myself with is canceling toxic playwrights like Neil LaBute. I don't use him in my classes. Dave Mamet, bruh, you ain't got no space in my classroom. Israel Horowitz, bruh, bye, done. You just cancel all these people. There's no room, because you know what? Dominique Morisseau, she'll represent. Katori Hall, she'll represent. You got all these wonderful playwrights that'll represent what you need with teaching. And so just cancel the toxic people, get them out of the curriculum, and you'll be fine.
I love all of this. I'm writing everything down. I'm glad we're recording it so that I can come back and take notes. Just like the list of playwrights that we have listed as like a master's course. If we just read one work from every playwright that's been mentioned today, except the canceled ones, we'd all have our MFAs. So the last topic that we wanted to chat about today briefly, and this one actually came from Juan Carlos, it was about sort of the microaggressions that come from stereotypical speech. Like when a director asks you to be more gospel, was that one of the examples, Juan Carlos? It was like when people are prompting you to like reinforce a stereotype, and either they're prompting performers who aren't performers of color to reinforce a stereotype, or the other ways that those microaggressions occur, and sort of the unacceptability of this type of speech. But I'd love to open up the floor for folks to talk about that.
I think that, it's a common occurrence. It actually is kind of, I think part of that happening and it being allowed to happen is because the people who are on the receiving end of that don't feel comfortable correcting it. In general, when you're in an audition space, particularly, aside from microaggressions, I think we're trained to just think that the space isn't our own in general, so we're trained to go in there, stand on our mark, do our thing. thinking about using the space or whatever is already a challenge for a lot of actors to begin with. But because of that energy, it can feel very difficult to, in the moment, correct the behavior. And feel that if one corrects the behavior, that it also won't affect the next 5 minutes, which are to get the job or the gig. So I think if people believed that notes could be received well, I think it would happen a lot less. I actually am going to be posting later today on social media about my experience with a casting director named Mark Brandon, who cast for The Lion King, and he has a history of microaggressions in the audition, using words like hood, jive, thug. In one of my callbacks for The Lion King, he said, "Just be your father." You know, and like I said earlier, I was a young upstart, so I might have been insane. But in that moment, I decided to tell him about himself, and but the fear of saying that and knowing that it could mean this is done for me is actually what keeps the microaggressions happening. So I think it's more about in terms of telling people how to not say microaggressions. It's more about creating a space where if you do make a mistake in that process of even auditioning, that person of color can be like, "Can you try that note again? Can we figure out a different way to say that?"
I completely agree. You know, again, I think everyone on this call who's a person of color can give you a list of microaggressions that they have had to go through themselves. I completely agree with Jason that the fear of being outcast and the fear of not working allows a system of microaggressions to continue. And the thing about it is like, you know, we don't have to have these conversations about white people, you know, because white people are allowed to be belligerent. They're allowed to speak their mind without, you know, having to wonder, are they gonna hire any more white people after this because I spoke up? Are they gonna punish, or are my white brothers and sisters going to be punished for me speaking up for myself? That's just not a thing that they have to worry about, you know? And so a lot of times actors in general, but specifically actors of color, have to, you know, justify the ends, you know, like they have to, you know, be like, okay, well, I can put up with this, I can put up with this, I can put up with this, but I'm not putting up with this. And that's super crazy to me, that like we have to like have itemized lists of things that we like, of microaggressions that we like, I don't want to say are comfortable with, because that's not it, but like a list of things that like, okay, well, that's not as bad as this other thing, so like I don't have to make as big of a deal about this thing because it's not this thing, you know. So, and I think that and I think that is something that white people don't have to think about, you know, like they don't have to think about whether or not, if they stand up for themselves, you know, is there going to be any pushback on my community because of that? Because you don't represent your community. Black people, unfortunately, have to represent their community because this system of white supremacy has kept them marginalized and kept them in a space where, you know, one decision reflects the whole community, and one fuck up can you know, really can really have lasting damage on, you know, other members of the community. So I think that's just something that white people need to be cognizant of. Is just like, people of color have to, you know, justify and really like set aside microaggressions every day, because the fight is bigger than just this one moment. You know what I mean?
All right. Well, we are coming close to our time. Zoe, did you have something to add?
Just a quick thing.
Sure.
A lot of these microaggressions come from people who identify as allies or liberals. The people who believe like, I'm in the arts and therefore like I get it, you know? And these are things that like are harmless. Like, I didn't mean it for you to take it in a bad way. I didn't mean that. And when people express their discomfort, oftentimes it's met with defensiveness. It's met with immediate like vitriol or shutting it down, like destroying the person in front of you to save your own place and power. And I think the accountability needs to fall on that person who used those words, period. It is not our responsibility to educate every ignorant white person we come across. It's our responsibility to live, and that is hard enough in this country, period, right? So if people are worried that something they say could come across as a microaggression, or think something that they do can come across as wrong and get them canceled or whatever, take this time, this moment, the rest of the quarantine, the rest of the shutdown, to educate yourself on anti-racism. There are a lot of programs, there are a lot of books that people are promoting right now. People have done the work. A lot of Black people have already answered these questions, and it is out there for you. So take accountability for yourself if you've ever questioned or been called out or had anything happen, and do it. Like, do the work. Because we've done the work. Every Black person in Mask had to educate themselves on their own history, because the state schools are not educating us on that kind of things, right? So we've taken the time to educate ourselves on truly where we come from, where these microaggressions and these terms come from, and the root of them and why they are offensive. So it's not our job to necessarily pass that information along. It's our job to survive. So they need to educate themselves. Be blessed.
That's great. Any other words from the panel? Well, that is the end of our special episode. I really, truly want to thank all of you today for being willing to come on the show and share your perspective with us. Obviously, there's a lot to digest from this talk today. And yeah, I thank you all for your words and your time. Time is all we have in this world, and it is extremely valuable to us that you spent this time with us. So I think that there is sort of a call to action that's implied here with this conversation that we've had today. Talking's great, right? Yeah, it's great to like have our perspectives be heard and all of that, but there are real action points here. This is not just about how all of us can listen to this great talk and feel good today about how we listened to a talk. That's not enough, right? So we need to speak up and advocate. We need to educate ourselves. We need to donate right now. There could not be a better time or a more important moment for us to donate our resources. We need to be creatives who create, and we need to vote. So thank you guys for tuning in today. Panel, thank you very much for being here with us today. And the conversation continues. If you have questions or you want have any comments, please put those in the comment below. Email me at amber@goshentheater.org or put them on the Facebook post that this will be a part of, and we'll get you in touch with people and we will get those questions answered. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, panelists, and have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.